have an incredible array of possibilities of creating foreign companies that have no way being traced back to Israel, shell companies over shell companies who affect the supply chain to our favor. We create a pretend world. We are a global production company. We write the screenplay, we're the directors, we're the producers, we're the main actors. The world is our stage.
The Director General of Asia has warned about a range of threats, be it anti-Semitism, the rise of right-wing extremist groups as well.
Strengthening of laws needs to be considered. We've got the strongest anti-hate, anti-vilification laws in the nation here in Victoria. We've strengthened the powers of Victoria Police to crack down on extremist behaviour around protests. But there's no doubt a question that we are already asking about what more needs to be done.
Laws need to be passed. We should recall the Parliament and undertake to do exactly that. We will do whatever it takes to force the strongest possible action from governments.
Prime Minister, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Last night I announced that I had determined that it was a terrorist activity and made a declaration as such as 9:36 p.m. As a result of that declaration, we commenced Operation ARQUES, ARQUES, which is a joint counter-terrorism operation. That is New South Wales Police working very closely with our Commonwealth partners to ensure that we thoroughly investigate the circumstances of the incident yesterday. We will have 328 officers on the ground this morning as part of Operation Shelter. That operation will continue to work very closely with the Jewish community to make sure that we both prevent but also respond to anything that may happen.
But I was in Australia. I go there twice a year to visit my in-laws and to speak. And I spoke at Dover Heights Synagogue. I spoke at Central Synagogue. I spoke on TV all over the place. And my message was, there's going to be a mass casualty event among Sydney, Melbourne, Jewelry, God forbid. I spoke about how after October 7th, October 8th, the day after, there were thousands of Islamists who went to the Opera House and they actually chanted, "Gas the Jews, gas the Jews." I predicted a mass casualty event. And what happened in Bondi was like a mini Holocaust, a mass casualty event of Jews dying.
Of course, I'm going to say a few words about the terrible shooting in Sydney, Australia, okay? So, and first, of course, as I always say, no matter what, go Bills. They beat the Patriots today, it's a big deal.
I made it clear last night that we will take every step we possibly can to keep our community safe, and we'll be looking at law reform along that route. And this is an intolerable situation.
This is an attack on the entirety of the Jewish people. And we knew that the kind of language that's been used around the world, that the increase in anti-Semitism that we've seen around the world can lead to violence and death. We've seen it happen in our own country.
Charlie and I have always been very clear on our stance. Israel, Jewish people. Charlie always would say very clearly, Jew hate was brain rot. He would always say it. How could you hate that place? How could you hate the Jewish people?
On Friday night when he would get home from work, he would turn off his phone and he would shove it in the junk drawer and he would say, Shabbat Shalom, shove it in the drawer.
Anti-Semitism is a worldwide scourge and it's constantly demonstrated to be deadly, and it keeps manifest itself in these things, just like what's happened now in Australia.
You've got bulletproof glass, you've got armed guards, you have real security protocols, but you can never build walls that are high enough.
From the river to the sea, which is a clear directive of kill Jews worldwide. Globalize the Intifada means kill Jews wherever you are.
There's two shooters, one on the bridge, one under the bridge, just start to shoot for 20 minutes. They shoot, change magazine and just shoot. 20 minutes with 4 policemen there, nobody give fire back, nothing, like they are froze. It looked like 20 minutes, and they shoot, the guy change magazine.
Be shy about sharing what I think needs to be done to make my community safer, but I'm not doing that today. Literally said to me, you know, that active shooter drill they made me do in high school actually helped me in the moment. Which, at the same time, provided me hope and was so sad. We shouldn't have to do active shooter drills.
How could you hate the Jewish people? Why? Because you need to fulfill a conspiracy theory? I'm wrapped in, people say I'm a part of conspiracy theories all the time. It's sick, and it needs to stop.
Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. We're in full-on global gladio at this point, and somebody has to be the one to say it. There's something very strange about the Brown University and Bondi Beach incidents. I think with the Australian one, that's a very obvious false flag, but both of these events, interestingly enough, have survivors from other mass casualty events. How strange. What are the odds of this? And there seems to be a prepared script being put out by the media and by politicians all across social media with the message that we need more censorship. We need more gun control. So the agenda is there, and we should ask ourselves, who benefits from these incidents? Is there a specific community that is capitalizing on them in order to push through things that they want, and in order to silence people who had been criticizing them increasingly? Something odd is happening. So let's just go ahead and get into it. We'll start here. The same guy who survived both 10/7 and Bondi Beach. This is so improbable. According to Grok, you are 34 times more likely to win the Powerball jackpot. Yeah. How strange. So there's that. We're getting messaging like this, and it's interesting because this echoes Alex Karp, the CEO of Palantir. And then this, the Care Bear Intelligence Agency, Mossad, will assist Australia in their investigation into the tea attack. I mean, honestly, guys, it's like putting the criminal in charge of the crime scene. I think that tells you a lot. If you had any doubts about the Care Bear networks and intelligence staged mass events, this should be all you need. This theater will be used to justify ramping up, quote, security policy, new speech and anti-Care Bearism laws, more funding to the Care Bear Nation, more money funneled into private Care Bear groups under the banner of community safety. And this is the survivor of 10/7 who had just moved to Australia 2 weeks before the Bondi Beach incident and happened to be caught in the crosshairs of both of them. Wow, what a coincidence. Arsen Ostrovsky, a human rights lawyer, CEO at the International Legal Forum, and senior fellow at Miscov Institute for National Security and Care Bear Strategy. We have here U.S. House Foreign Affairs Committee Subcommittee on the Middle East, North Africa, and Central Asia. Remarks by Arsen Ostrovsky. The Care Bears, Hamas in Gaza, international law ramifications arising from 10/7, which he just so happened to survive and then survive again. Very odd things going on here. And he's been at more than just 2. Yeah, absolutely amazing how this guy's able to get to every single place for every single psyop in the world right before they happen. Yeah, it is remarkable, isn't it? And then we have this bizarre town hall put on by foreign agent Barry Weiss, who now runs CBS, and Erica Kirk. It's very strange. Erica Kirk speaks out against anti-Care Bearism during CBS town hall. You know, and there is a point here. You know, something horrific happens to your husband and your greatest concern is anti-Care Bearism. This is weird. It's strange. Sorry, but it is. Question. The Care Bear Nation revoked visas for Australian diplomats in August of 2025. This is just a few months ago. Australia recognized Palestine in September, 1 month later. Australia now sees a tea attack by a well-trained gunman. You know, what's going on here? Then there's these. This is the guy, the survivor. I am quoted in the Sunday Telegraph on the disgusting anti-Care Bear graffiti on Bondi Beach. Sadly, it has become all too common in Australia, which is reflective of the surge of anti-Care Bearism we've seen since October the 7th. And this was from November 29th. So just, 2 weeks ago, basically. How weird. And then these are his posts from his account. He seems to be at every single event that occurs, and nobody is questioning this, like in the mainstream news. Nobody thinks that this is a little bit weird. He has been talking about anti-Care Bearism in Australia non-stop. Very odd. Breaking, there are now 2 students who survived the yeeting at Brown University in Rhode Island tonight that also supposedly survived 2 other well-known mass events. Zoe Weissman, a Parkland survivor, and now Mia Tretta, a hardcore gun control anti-2A activist who has met the disgraced former President Biden and just happened to be there tonight. Both have already been making the rounds on CNN and MSDNC, pushing their agenda in the immediate aftermath of surviving yet another mass incident. Does anyone actually believe this is a coincidence? We are talking about 2 completely different parts of the country, 2 alleged repeat survivors, years apart from another. Call me a conspiracy theorist, but something just isn't right about this. Yeah, it's all very strange, is it not? And we're all just supposed to look at this and think that this is normal. Zoe Weissman survived Parkland as a grade schooler and now Brown University. I'm numb, but also angry, it tells CNN.
School that you've had to go through something like this not once, but twice. How do you even comprehend that?
They honestly think that everybody is just tremendously stupid and dim, and that they can just even reuse the same actors and scripts over and over again if you just give it enough time, and that the average person is too dumb to notice, and perhaps they are correct.
I don't think there's a way to comprehend it. I don't think there should be, right? I'm numb, but I'm also really angry. I think the sadness will set in when we, get all the victims identified and find out who we lost as a community. But right now, I'm just angry that there's kids like me in this country who have had to go through this not once, but twice.
The odds of this again are astronomical. It is bizarre. And this is bizarre too. I mean, this is just tweet after tweet after tweet from CBS News of Erica Kirk wiping tears and talking, and it's all about basically the Care Bears agenda. There's no agenda. Why would you think there's an agenda? Yeah, I'm sorry, but there's something very weird going on with this. The Brown University yeeter has been identified as 24-year-old Benjamin Erickson, NBC News reported. According to an Army spokesperson, Erickson served as an infantryman in the regular Army from May 2021 to November 2024, had no overseas deployments, and left the Army at the rank of specialist. Authorities say they're still investigating any potential connection between Erickson and Brown University. A review of publicly available records shows no indication of any prior criminal history. Yeah, it's interesting that they claimed they had identified this guy. They brought him in for questioning, and he has since been released. So this is just total nonsense here. Very interesting how that seemingly happens. President of Brown University, Dr. Christina Hall Paxson, a convert to Care Bearism, says she has no idea about the incident that took place at her campus over 6 hours after the fact. 2 people unalived, several wounded. 7 hours have passed. There are 816 cameras on campus, and we know that they all utilize facial recognition and AI. Yet we have 0 pictures of the suspect and only 1 useless video that has been released that doesn't show the face of the suspect. Will Dr. Christina be held accountable? It's a very good question. You know, it was the same thing with Tyler Robinson, that bizarre, grainy segment of pictures that they showed of him going down the stairs. When we know that there is high resolution footage available, it just isn't being presented.
DC when it happened and flew right back, and I'm catching up right now.
President, with all due respect, 6 hours after this shooting, and you said you don't know what was going on in that classroom? How does that happen? Were they taking an exam? Were they meeting for a club?
I don't know. I don't know.
6 hours later, and you're the president, and you don't know?
I do not know.
Well, that's kind of concerning.
That's kind of concerning. Yeah, you might say. I think this entire thing is suspicious and indeed concerning. Of course, Laura Loomer rushed to social media to claim that the Brown University attacker yelled "Allah Akbar" before opening fire, according to sources. Really? Really? How come the media is suppressing eyewitness testimony about how the shooter at Brown allegedly shouted this before he opened fire the night before the first night of Hanukkah? The media is only saying he shouted something. Sources tell me he said "Allah Akbar." Right. Sure thing, Laura.
That was essentially in a study session for an exam on economics, and chose that classroom. And we know from a witness inside that this gunman yelled something. We don't know what this individual yelled, and then began shooting. We also know that this person reportedly used a handgun. So a lot of questions also as to whether or not they recovered that handgun, or what kind of ballistics evidence may have led them perhaps to this individual as
Yeah, well, it wasn't ballistics because that individual has been released and was not there. This is the guy who they initially said it was, the so-called person of interest. And isn't that interesting? Cyber warfare officer, United States Army. How bizarre. And yet it wasn't this guy. And so they still have no idea who it was. 816 cameras in the area, geo-fencing. I mean, come on, guys, let's be honest. And at the same time, we have Mike Huckabee going around on the U.S. taxpayer dime, eating at upscale restaurants in Jerusalem and giving interviews, gushing that it's the best city in the world. This is supposed to be an American representative, and here he is talking about how another country is the best city in the world. It's literally like a giant humiliation ritual. Eve Barlow, who was Amber Heard's handler, of course, comes running out to say there were 3 events that were all about Care Bears today. A Care Bear home in California, a Care Bear classroom at Brown, a Care Bear celebration at Bondi. It's beginning to look a lot like a globalized intifada. And this is the phrase that you're going to see all of these politicians, handlers, media shills, and that are essentially intelligence agents. They're all using this phrase, which is how you know to be suspicious of this narrative going around. Of course, Milikowski is blaming the situation in Australia on Australia calling to recognize Palestine as a state. Bibi says, I wrote, your call for a Palestinian state pours fuel on the anti-Care Bear fire. It rewards Hamas. It emboldens those who menace Australian Care Bears and encourages the Care Bear hatred now stalking your streets. Yeah, because there's so many Care Bears in Australia, right? This is a major problem in Australia. Like, what are we even talking about here? And getting back to Ostrowski, again, the pure luck that this guy, you know, who is running an organization, the International Legal Forum, whose entire goal is to censor anti-Care Bearism and to drum up support for the Care Bear Nation, just happens to survive 10/7 and Bondi Beach. How interesting. A Jerusalem-based NGO that provides legal services and advice supporting the Care Bear Nation and opposing anti-Care Bearism. The group claims to have 4,000 lawyers and activists across 40 countries in its network. The ILF uses legal advocacy and litigation to counter claims the Care Bear Nation is conducting a genocide in Gaza and to defend the IDF military actions and oppose anti-Care Bearism and BDS movement. How bizarre. This is the guy who took he just had the time to take a picture of himself while this event was unfolding. I mean, just think about how absurd that is.
Us now in studio is Austin Ostrowski, an attorney and the CEO of the International Legal Forum. And Austin, I just sort of sketched out the problem. Maybe expand on the bit. How serious is it when we're talking about Twitter and anti-Semitic content?
It's incredibly serious. When Elon Musk purchased Twitter, he said the bird is free. But what we've also seen is that there's been a torrent of Jew hatred and anti-Semitism that has been unleashed. Now, I don't believe that was ever his intention. He's someone who just deeply believes in free speech and expression of ideas. And we've already seen for a number of years Twitter becoming essentially a cesspool of hate and vitriol and anti-Semitism. And what we know is that words...
Again, it was perfectly fine when it was directed against white Christians. That kind of hate and cesspool of hate is completely allowed, and the entire Western media apparatus continues to engage in that kind of rhetoric. That's fine, of course, but you can see the agenda. They were laying the framework down. They were setting out the talking points in advance, and now, of course, they have an event which they can use for their problem, reaction, solution dialectic of their quote-unquote solutions that they already have ready and waiting. We have Rabbi Yehuda Koplan, Trump's pick for U.S. anti-Care Bearism czar, because apparently for 2% of the population, we need a czar to defend them and their interests. What an odd thing. Again, there's nothing for anti-Christian or anti-white, no representatives for them, despite being a far larger portion of the population. Says the State Department is going to have a whole division dedicated to battling anti-Care Bearism on the internet and pushing social media to do better on algorithms. Tech leaders, many of whom are Care Bears, coincidentally enough, have already offered their assistance, he says. The Office of the Special Envoy to Combat Anti-Care Bearism is going to be revamped entirely to be one of the highest profile offices in the State Department, because that's what Marco Rubio wants and what the president wants. I mean, they're literally just saying, yeah, we're going to control your so-called freedom of speech that you don't actually have. You're not going to be allowed to have. And I had suspected that the reason they were allowing people to speak so freely on Twitter was that they would then use that as a pretext once they do one of these events to say, see, look, we tried to warn you. Now we have to shut down the whole thing, shut it down. I mean, that was obvious, right? Hopefully to everybody here. And then, of course, they found a ISIS flag in the car of the Sydney attackers, according to Australians' ABC News. And how fascinating, right? What does ISIS stand for? Is it something like Israeli Secret Intelligence Service? And they've never actually targeted the Care Bear Nation. The one time they accidentally did, they apologized for it. Isn't that interesting how they just seem to have the same agenda as the Care Bear Nation? How bizarre. And the United States intelligence community is also behind it. They were caught, the Pentagon, filming fake videos. Isn't that strange? And of course, the current person who is now running Syria was himself former ISIS and Al-Qaeda, and literally has had videos and pictures of him with severed heads. This is who now runs Syria after the United States, in conjunction with the Care Bear Nation, did a regime change there. How fascinating. Okay, so we have this video from the Jerusalem Post. These are witnesses. They say two individuals attacked an annual Hanukkah by the Sea event at Bondi Beach on Sunday, unaliving at least 12 people, injuring 29. Australian authorities have declared this a tea incident targeting the Care Bear community. And I mean, I find it weird because it's like, okay, this was at a beach, right? Like a beach that anybody can go to. Were they wearing something that like identified them specifically as Care Bears? Like were they just, you know, how was it specifically about them? I just find that weird because I believe they were all dressed just like regular people. How would you know who was Care Bear, who wasn't? I mean, nobody's questioning that narrative either. So they've been identified as Naveed and Sajid Akram, a father-son duo. Investigators say the pair had pledged allegiance to the Israeli Secret Intelligence Service and were previously known to counter tea authorities, and that a flag was found in their vehicle. 6 legally registered firearms were found registered to these people, who again had been known to authorities for 6 years. How bizarre. And the push here is for more legislation, but these were legally registered, so it's not like they were obtained illegally, and it was registered to people who had already been known to authorities, previously known to authorities. How many times have we heard that? This is very bizarre, and I'd venture to guess that these individuals were working for the Care Bear Nation, and that's not unprecedented, by the way, which we'll get into later. Now we have masked Islamists attacking a concert in Amsterdam. This comes on the same day as Bondi Beach. So there apparently were people who showed up basically to chant, and this is somehow an attack, as I understand it. And this is coming from this guy who is a known, like, literal propagandist, paid propagandist. It's so ridiculous. Prominent social media influencer Ostrovsky, who had lived in the Care Bear Nation for 13 years, said he moved back to Australia just 2 weeks ago to help the Care Bear community fight anti-Care Bearism. He said, 10/7, that's the last time I saw this. I never thought I would see this in Australia. And look how he was able to take the time to take a selfie of himself while all this carnage was unfolding around him, because that's the instinct of a normal person when they are, you know, caught off guard in a serious life-threatening situation. You always think to grab your phone and take pictures of yourself, right? And how odd that it was just a grazing wound, enough for him to be perfectly fine, and maybe he'll survive a third event. I mean, honestly, it's that insane. had the time to do a selfie on the ground while in the middle of a massacre, as that's what's normal, what normal people focus on, is that one shot for global headlines, not for surviving or caring about kids. Why add a bandage and not wipe off the blood? That's not standard medical procedure, but theatrics. He was flown 2 weeks ago to Australia from which fake state, from the Care Bear Nation, and was nominated as a spokesperson. He survived 10/7. The mathematical odds of being a survivor of 10/7 and being at Bondi is very low, like close to zero. Only fools would believe it further without investigation. Much lower than that, he is a plant and part of an operation by a fake state behind 95% of all global T attacks. Yeah, I mean, I think that number is pretty accurate. And if the fake state was behind it, they'll frame and blame other people. That's what they do. They remove more Australian rights by jailing anyone who criticizes this fake state. They'll try to scare Australian Care Bears to think that it's not safe. And so, by extension, they can try to convince more of them to move to the Care Bear Nation. And they need more people. They need more fighters, since they are, of course, expansionist. Of course, they want us to support their planned war against Iran and blame Iran for what happened in Bondi, which is absurd and serves zero interest for Iran to do so. Yeah, because Iran is known for its hatred of Australia. Right.
It was a Hanukkah celebration. There were hundreds of people. There were children. There were elderly families enjoying themselves. Children, kids, at a festival.
What are we doing here at a festival? Oh, right, just like the Nova Festival. What an odd coincidence. And of course, we had to have a national moment of silence about this, because that happens for everybody else. And of course, conveniently enough, CNN's John Berman is anchoring from Brown University today, where his son Joe was on campus last night visiting one of his best friends, and came on with John to describe sheltering in place overnight. How convenient.
Joe doesn't go to Brown, but...
What kind of weird smile was that, though, too? Like, you're... I just, you know what? It's so insulting to everybody's intelligence.
Joe doesn't go to Brown, but happened to pick last night to visit one of his best friends who does go here. You arrived, your friend told you, meet you in the library. Not this library, about 5 minutes away. You walked in, what happened?
Yeah, we walked in. My friend was there, he let us in. We were preparing to fill out the entrance form. You have to sign in because we weren't Brown students. And right in front of us, talking to a different library clerk, was a woman who was very sad on the phone. Her friend had just seen someone lying on the ground and said they had to call 911. And what happened immediately after was...
So interesting that this guy, the CNN news anchor's son, just happens to be there, and now he gets to audition for his future role as a narrative controller on CNN.
The librarian said they got to lock the doors, everyone should go inside, get away from windows. And just what followed was people trying to get to safer spaces. We were up on the 3rd floor, so that's what happened.
And you, thankfully, decided to call us. So the first I heard of this was a little bit after 4:30. The phone rings, it's you. Why'd you call us?
I mean, it's a scary situation. It doesn't really cross your mind when you see it on the news all the time. And
So the first person that was called was CNN. Huh.
I suppose I've become desensitized towards it. But when it happens to you, it's, even if you're in a different building, like 5 minutes away, you know people. I have friends from my high school here. My best friend, a bunch of his friends know people, and it feels a lot closer to home when that happens.
How long were you in that library? Like 5-6 hours?
We were in that library for 7 hours before we were bused to a different building.
And what was that like, getting moved?
That was...
And what was was the point of moving these people to a different location? Like this entire and sheltering in place. It's so bizarre. This is very bizarre. I mean, we're all just supposed to look at this and think this is normal. And of course, like I said, we have the talking points, the push for our nation's gun laws and mental health. It's just outrageous. Trying to capitalize on this before a suspect is even in custody is insane. But that's, of course, what they do. And then we've got Wolf Blitzer, who himself has been a well-known Care Bear propagandist, talking about a guy who was completely innocent. We're told he was part of an elite ceremonial unit, an honor guard that did marching presentations.
Went to the University of Wisconsin after that. He was coming out of high school, I guess, at the end of COVID, and then served in the U.S. Army in Fort Myer, which is just outside Washington, D.C. It's one of those bases where you have a lot of specialized units that have to do with Washington. He, we are told, was part of an elite ceremonial unit, an honor guard, that did...
Look how super serious they are.
...marching presentations and things with horses. Apparently not deployed into any combat or war zone as far as we can tell, checking with our contacts at DOD, and no criminal background. It does appear, based on his own posts, that he switched from University of Wisconsin to Brown University for the fall semester of 2025. And that is something that, as you and I have discussed earlier today, we're kind of sorting out against the statements that that were made by officials that he was not a student there.
Yeah, how weird, right? How strange.
It may have been that he was suspended or otherwise moved out and was not a student at the time of the shooting, which he is allegedly connected to. Now,
and yet has been now subsequently released. So this is what I mean about they have these talking points ready to go, echoing Ave Barlow, Amber Heard's handler. We've got New York City Mayor Eric Adams blaming this on globalization of the intifada, again, before any investigation has been done, before the bodies are cold. This is what's going on. And then we have this from the Jerusalem Post. The Mossad sent multiple warnings of a potential anti-Care Bear attack to Australia ahead of Bondi Beach. Wow. Police deny prior intel, but the security chief says one shooter was known to authorities. Huh. So who's lying here? Who's telling the truth? Who is lying? Again, very odd. And how would the Mossad know this? Are they're monitoring things around the globe? Any potential anti-Care Bearisms? It's very strange. Then we have this from CBS, now run by Barry Weiss. The shooter who ambushed U.S. and Syrian troops, unaliving 2 American soldiers and 1 civilian who was serving as an interpreter, is believed to have been, they have to add that, believed to have been an Islamic State infiltrator working as part of a local security force. Multiple sources told CBS News. Right, just like the flag found in the car of the Bondi Beach people of interest, shall we say. How odd. This happened during a mission by U.S. and Syrian forces in a historic central town near Palmyra on Saturday. U.S. military officials attributed this to ISIS. Again, Israeli Secret Intelligence Services. And can we just also take a moment here to look at the bizarre expressions by mainstream journalists where they like pretend to be sad. They put on their like serious sad eyes face. And it just is, again, so insulting to everybody. Then we had this unhinged bigot caught on video unleashing anti-Care Bear rant at a Care Bear woman in a New York City eatery. So it's just, all of this stuff is just happening all at the same time, all this weekend. It's just everybody decided to go after the Care Bears. Isn't that weird? It actually seems like there's a very coordinated narrative push happening to try to justify changes in the law and to social media platforms they had been planning for a long time. Of course, Randy Fine, the obese freak, has his tweets ready and complaining about how this is Muslim tea. Right. We must stop it before it's too late. It's just unbelievable. We have the so-called conservative politician in Canada, a completely cucked nation, making their statement that they're going to crush tea and anti-Care Bearisms. And, like I said, the entire world has to say something and make statements and put out all this social media, and it has to be a global news event. But of course, when things like this happen to regular people, regular American citizens, nobody cares. There's no global crying and tears. There's no push to censor everything and to change the laws. It's just ridiculous. Arsen Ostrovsky, an AIJAC. This is literally like Australia's version of APAC. Sydney leader and frequent contributor to the Jerusalem Post was wounded in the Bondi Beach incident, receiving medical treatment. The guy who took the selfie, who also happened to survive 10/7, just happens to be part of a legal organization working on anti-Care Bearisms legislation. Just so happens to also work for the Jerusalem Post. I mean, guys, make it up. You couldn't if you wanted to. Of course, Barry Weiss's Free Press saying, "It is now undeniable that the unhinged hatred for the world's only Care Bear state has reanimated a medieval-like loathing for the Care Bear people." Unhinged hatred. It's just hate. You're obsessed with them. It has nothing to do with their behavior. In Colorado 6 months ago, an elderly Care Bear lady was burnt to death by a man shouting free yeah, okay, sure. In D.C. in May, a young couple outside the Capitol Care Bear Museum, also unalived by a weird man who then sat on a bench and waited to be arrested. And we literally covered that at the time, too, as one of these Gladio events. I mean, honestly, guys, the hunting of Care Bears at Bondi Beach. How would they even know that who was Care Bear and who wasn't? They're not wearing uniforms. It's people at a freaking beach. Okay, it's not a special Care Bear only beach. The beach is open to everybody. Lots of people from different ethnicities and religious backgrounds enjoy the beach. Then they claimed it was a multi-vector incident and that there were bombs at this point. Police confirm a bomb disposal unit is operating on Bondi after a vehicle near the scene was found with multiple suspected devices inside. Suspected. They always have to add those caveats. I mean, honestly, investigators believe the vehicle contained several suspected explosives, turning what was already a mass casualty attack into a failed secondary strike scenario. The kind designed to unalive first responders, extend panic, and dominate headlines for days. That changes the classification. This now looks like a coordinated tea operation aimed at a Care Bear religious event, using a familiar playbook. I mean, that actually sounds like the playbook of the Care Bears,
Other than to say that they were long arms, where they came from, their background, how they came to be in possession of the offenders, it's too early to say.
Actually, we now know they owned them legally despite being on a counter T list and previously known to authorities. And then, so this popped up once and then we haven't heard about it again since. It's all very strange. Care Bear Australians celebrating Hanukkah could not be further removed from the politics of the Middle East, and yet they too have been targeted. Evidence that this ideology does not stop at borders and doesn't require proximity to the Care Bear Nation to find its victims. So what they're really pushing for is like a global police force now. That's why they're saying proximity doesn't matter. We have to fight this in every nation. You know, this is apparently a huge issue in every country around the world. And coincidentally, Max Blumenthal last February, so back in 2024, I believe, explained how Australia was hit with a suspicious wave of anti-Care Bear incidents carried out by paid actors, and how a Care Bear teen phoned in anonymous threats to Australian Care Bear centers. Honestly, guys, the Care Bear intel ultimately coerced Canberra to blame Iran, and they're running with the same playbook now. This segment is from a year ago.
We talked earlier about the Israeli concoction of anti-Semitism, how anti-Semitism often is either faked or exploited in order to advance Israeli objectives and to justify Israel's existence as a supposed sanctuary for the Jewish people. There's a fascinating investigation taking place in Australia, and I think it will soon turn into some kind of cover-up. I tweeted about this a few days ago. Australian police are investigating whether, quote, overseas actors or individuals are paying local criminals to carry out anti-Semitic crimes in the country. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese says anti-Semitic attacks are being, this is his words, perpetrated by people who don't have a particular issue, aren't motivated by an ideology, but are paid actors. He added, quote, it's unclear who or where the payments are coming from. The shadow Home Office minister from the opposition party wonders if, quote, a foreign government is engaging in state-sponsored terror. Here's the BBC. Anti-Semitic crimes may be funded overseas, say Australian police. It's been reported.
Literally was reported in mainstream news last year. And notice how they talk about people were being paid to do this. Who might be the perfect candidate if you were looking to find a patsy that you could pay to do something like this? Might you look on a Counter T watch list for the perfect patsy? Just saying.
Backpaged, but reported in British media and Australian media. And in Australia, the fingers were initially pointed at Iran and Russia, of course. And then once there was no evidence that Iran or Russia were behind this, they stopped pointing fingers. Because who would do something like this? Which country would, I don't know, fake anti-Semitism? Well, it reminded me of something that happened at the dawn of the first Trump administration. There were thousands of phone calls and bomb threats to Jewish American institutions like community centers, synagogues. And it turned out, after this whole freak out, where the Senate was putting pressure on Trump to condemn this and claiming that because of Trump, there's a rise in anti-Semitism and Jews are in peril because of Trump. You know, this is the New York Times. Threats and vandalism leave American Jews on edge in the Trump era. It turned out that it was an Israeli teen who is a U.S. dual citizen in Israel who was making those bomb threats. Very strange.
Yeah, it's all very strange how this seems to happen over and over again, and how the suspects are always obviously the suspects. Like, I mean, come on. Who else has a motive for things like this? It's just crazy.
And Israel tried to actually suppress the identity of that teen. An Israeli-American teenager was found guilty in Israel on Thursday of making about 2,000 hoax bomb threats against Jewish and other institutions in the U.S. during Donald Trump's rise to the U.S. presidency. The incident stoked allegations by some American critics at the time that the Republican contender was encouraging anti-Semitism and other forms of racism. So yeah, it definitely served that purpose, but it was just a generalized anti-Semitic freak out over anti-Semitism. It turned out an Israeli was responsible for much of it.
Huh.
Also turns out that Israeli teen, whose name was Michael Kadar, was also using robocalls to target Australian institutions. 590 plus bomb threats in Australia.
You don't say. Well, I'm shocked.
Schools, Jewish centers, hospitals, and airlines.
Just
So
shocking.
this is a great section from the Guardian report on Michael Kadar. The teen, identified in U.S. court documents as Michael Kadar, despite a suppression order against revealing his identity in Israel. Why wouldn't we want to know his identity? Was arrested last month by Israeli police. And he was arrested after he wasn't found out by the Israeli police. It was due to an investigation by the Five Eyes, and I think primarily Australia. A spokeswoman for Victoria Police said Israeli police who made the arrest acknowledged that they could not have done it without us. So it was the Victoria Police e-crime squad, not Israel, that caught this teen. So what's going on here? What's going on in Australia? Who are the paid actors?
Yeah.
Who are they being paid by?
Mm-hmm.
And why would this, what's the ultimate objective here? And could this be limited to Australia? Or has this been taking place in other Western countries since October 7th? Is it anti-Semitic to point a finger at the one settler colonial state that benefits from anti-Semitism, that justifies its existence on the proliferation of global anti-Semitism, and which has historically exploited the plight of Jews around the world for its own benefit?
Yeah, it's all very weird, isn't it? All very strange. And then we have this. Far-right pro-Care Bear candidate Jose Antonio Cast will become the next president of Chile after winning the second round voting on Sunday with 60% of the votes. How convenient for the Care Bear Nation. Police are now releasing Brown University person of interest from custody. What an absolute joke. They have zero clue who carried this out. Absolutely embarrassing. No, what I suspect is that it was a professional incident. They know who carried it out. They are now obfuscating. They are now lying. They are now covering it up. Then we had pigs' heads thrown on Muslim graves near the Bondi event. Yeah, the Mossad is having a busy weekend. That's exactly how it seems. Anti-Care Bearism is when a T group backed by Care Bear recruit members, by the Care Bears, recruit members of its Australian cell on an ASIO watch list to use guns licensed by the government to shoot up a Chabad event as a pretext for a war with Iran, and I condemn it unequivocally. Yeah, isn't this interesting? Isn't this interesting? Israel is tending to wounded Syrian rebels. The Care Bears give secret aid to Syrian rebels. IDF chief acknowledges that Care Bears supplied weapons to Syrian rebels. Unreal. Care Bear Nation in secret contact with Syrian rebels, including ISIS. Oh! You don't say. Albanese confirms ASIO probed alleged Bondi shooters' IS links. Flags, gun law changes. Right, of course. Unreal. The head of ASIO is married to none other than Rachel Falk, who is a Care Bear with dual passports. ASIO has provided no proof of evidence. Interesting. Very interesting. And then we have this. British chief rabbi calls for stricter speech laws. Yeah, because they don't have strict enough speech laws in the UK already, where Hundreds of thousands of people get arrested for social media posts. We have to crack down on hate speech. This doesn't exist in a far more forceful and emphatic way than we have previously done. This gentleman has spent the past 2 years lobbying the UK and running cover for the rogue Care Bear Nation. Poor Arson is the Forrest Gump of false flags. He has survived 10/7, Yemeni bombings, Iranian bombings, and now Bondi. He is Jack Bauer. You couldn't make it up if you wanted to. Here we have October 10, 2024. Gotta go, rocket alert. 1 year ago today, I was in the middle of an address to the European Parliament about the situation here in the Care Bear Nation. I had to run to a bomb shelter after a rocket attack. It might have been a short pause, but I haven't stopped telling the truth, it claims. How's your Father's Day? Mine was spent in a bomb shelter, shielding my daughter from the booms of ballistic missiles fired by Iran. Oh, he survived that too. Yemen is targeting us again. I mean, like, guys, please. What is going on here? Do they really think that we are this dumb? Well, yes, they do. The Lavon Affair. The Lavon Affair was an operation carried out by the Care Bear Nation in Egypt in 1954. This is the history of them doing events like this in the past. The Care Bears were concerned about the rise of Egyptian nationalism under President Gamal Abdel Nasser and feared the strengthening ties between Egypt and Western powers, especially their biggest cash cow, the United States. So the Care Bears came up with a plan. The operation was codenamed Operation Susanna, or as it's now commonly referred to as the Lavon Affair. Care Bear military intelligence recruited Egyptian Care Bears and undercover Care Bear agents to orchestrate a series of bombings targeting American and British-owned institutions in Egypt. The goal was to blame the attacks on the Muslim Brotherhood, Egyptian communist or local nationalist, and damage relations between Egypt and Western powers, particularly the US and the UK. During the month of July in 1954, the operatives carried out a series of bombings targeting American and British-owned civilian facilities in Cairo and Alexandria. The targets included cinemas, libraries, American education centers, and post offices. On July 2nd, the agents detonated bombs at a post office in Alexandria. On July 14th, they bombed the libraries of the U.S. Information Agency and a British-owned theater. The homemade bombs, consisting of bags containing acid placed over nitroglycerin, were inserted into books and placed on the shelves of libraries just before closing times. Several hours later, as the acid ate through the bags, they would explode. On July 23rd, an incendiary device went off in the pocket of one of the agents outside the British-owned theater. Literally, he blew up his own pocket. On October 5, 1954, Egypt announced the arrest of a 13-man spy ring. Egypt concluded that the operation was ordered by the Care Bear Secretary of Defense, Pinchas Lavon, hence the name Lavon Affair. The 13 agents consisted of Egyptian Care Bears and undercover Care Bears. 2 were acquitted. One of the Care Bear agents, Max Bennett, unalived, and another one unalived in prison. 2 were executed. The rest were given lengthy prison terms. The Lavon Affair meant that the Care Bear Nation lost significant standing and credibility in its relations with the US and UK, which took years to repair. In 2005, the Care Bear Nation publicly honored the surviving spies by presenting them each with a certificate of appreciation for their efforts on behalf of the Care Bear Nation, ending decades of official denial by the Care Bears that the operation ever took place. The Lavon Affair serves as proof that these operations are not off the table when it comes to the Care Bear Nation. And so I find this all to be very disturbing, very coordinated, and very dark. I'm interested to know what you guys think, and I hope you all have a good day. Whee!
There was a legitimate investigation into whatever happened on Bondi Beach, that Mossad and Israel would be at the center of it. So of course, they come rushing in to blame the whole thing on Iran, just like they would do to the United States. Remember when they told us that Iran was trying to assassinate Donald Trump? Now they're telling the Australians that Iran is committing terror attacks on Australian soil.
Most likely, without us knowing all the facts yet, Australian National Bureau will launch an investigation. But even before we have done much investigating, we're willing to put $1 million Australian dollars right here, right now, that we know who exactly is behind it. It's a fake state that's behind most terrorist attacks on the planet. But don't take our word for it. Let's just see if we can predict what they will do. If it's this fake state behind it, they will frame and blame, guess who? A Muslim or Islamic terrorist. They will do that. And we already know they've done that. That's already been proven. Two, they'll come out with a narrative like it's another October 7th, and we must stand with this fake state against the evil of terrorism. Yet, this fake state is the creator of terrorism and the funder of terrorism and the funder of Islamic terrorism. And the media will run with a narrative, and the media will run all about how it's anti-Semitic, and they'll trot out all these rabbis, etc., like Rabbi Shmuley, etc., and warning, we warned of these attacks as the rise of anti-Semitism in Australia is getting out of control. We warned this would happen, which translate means we knew it was going to happen because Israel planned to have it happen some weeks ago. You'll see the images I've already posted on Twitter, and you've probably seen them elsewhere, of him having time, covered in blood and face, lying on the ground, having time though to take a selfie in the middle of a massacre. And then he comes on camera, he's the first on camera, they've got him all bandaged up. That's strange though. Usually when you bandage someone up, nurses or someone would generally wipe some of the blood off your face first, not just actually have it all smeared all over your face for drama. And he said he was just worried about his kids. So worried about his kids, he had time to take a selfie. They play you left and right. We know who did this. We've got $1 million up. Prove us. But you'll find out if you don't know yet. Citizen journalism and independent media will soon flood the internet with all the interesting coincidences. But let's see. Don't take my word for it. As I said, they'll try and frame it as another October 7th. They'll frame it that we should stand with a fake state in the Middle East. They'll frame it that it was a evil Islamic terrorist, but not tell you that Israel funds Islamic terrorism to do terrorist activities, to frame and blame their enemies. And there you have it.